Welcome, folks, to the 18th of October, Aries Working Group call. Having not had one last week due to IIW, glad you're back. This is a Hyperledger call, so the antitrust policy notice, the antitrust policy and the Hyperledger Code of Conduct are in effect. Both links are present in the agenda. Agenda link being in the Zoom chat or in the regular place on the Hyperledger Wiki. Please make any adjustments that are useful to the community, including adding yourself to the attendee list if you would like, and anything else that would be useful to the community. Is there anyone new to our meeting that would like to say hello and introduce themselves? All right, well, I'm glad everyone is here. Announcements. IW now passed, so the next upcoming thing is the Hyperledger Summit on the 23rd of October. That would be next Monday in San Francisco and in Tokyo. Any other announcements that we should have but don't? All right. Any groups want to share any progress made in recent weeks with the work items and the projects that we have?
Hi, short update for Aries VCX. Not too much new, but we had 060 release, which had where we finalized removing VDR tools and on-creds implementation, so that's completely gone. The only thing left out from VDR tools we are keeping right now is the wallet, and we're planning to chip in ASCAR implementation in upcoming future. Other than that, we also had unfortunately the DIT Peer 4 implementation paused a bit, but we are resuming that effort, and consequently that will unlock completion of DIT exchange for us, and also perhaps some experimentation on DITCOM v2 front. And lastly, I'd like to just note that we have our mentorship projects kind of coming to completion in 3 weeks or so. So perhaps next week I would like to just quickly give a short update or and maybe a demo, maybe not full-blown demo, just a kind of a conclusion, a report on this project, if that's fine.
I think that'd be wonderful to hear. And I think next week is a great time to have it.
Awesome.
Cool. Other updates? I saw some movement on Akapai.
Yeah, there was an Akapai 0.10.4 release that went out for an interop issue. So that was a patch on the 0.10x line. We still have a number of PRs in the main branch that have not been released. So we're still working on that, moving forward with things like did rotate, did peer 4. So continued progress. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
Lots going on in that world. We also had Alexander here from DSR. We had an excellent presentation on Please Act yesterday, and I think helped clarify a bunch of things to do with that, which is the last AIP2 protocol that is to be implemented. So we're looks like we have a path for that. I think there's a few more things to think about on that, but I think we're very close on that. So that's good.
Very cool. All right, any other updates?
Right. I went a bit late. I don't know if somebody already gave an update on AFJ.
No, please.
Okay, so we are working on the 0.5 release now, which should be a like simpler update, but it will drop support for Node 16 and also the Indie SDK we're thinking of now. So unless people would have problems with us dropping Indie SDK already, but we're trying to clear up some technical debt and removing old stuff, and we think it's time to drop support. So that's our intention for the 0.5 release coming soon. And it will also include revocation for Anocrat's credentials. So that's our target currently.
What was the other thing you mentioned, Timo? I didn't get it on the list before I slipped out of my brain.
Dropping Node 16 support. So only
right.
we'll target Node 18 and 20 because it has reached end of life, and there's some things that don't work well in Node 16. So yeah, also part of our cleanup process.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you for the update.
Patrick, do you have a question about FJ or?
Yeah, Timo, just a quick one, if I may ask. I'm just curious about the revocations. Are you, is this integration with the Anoncreds RS library?
Yeah. So it's the revocation based on Anocreds RS, not in the SDK, and the work has been like almost done for a while already, but there were some issues in Anocreds RS, and we have now gotten to release like a new version of the Anocreds RS library, or in the process of it.
So we are no longer working with the deltas, or we had a brief kind of shot at this, and we decided to postpone this and just stay at credits right now. But I'm wondering, how did you how, if it was challenging, or how did you go about the different approach between between Credex and Anoncreds RS in terms of the revocation deltas and this stuff? If you have any comments on that.
Yeah, so with the 0.40 release of AFJ, we fully moved the interface that we use in AFJ already to the new format from Anocreds RS and the new Anocreds spec, and we transformed like the legacy indie deltas to the new format. So for us, we already moved over basically to that new format, and it's quite easy to do the transformations between them, because basically if you combine all deltas in the initial state, you get like the new format, which is like the full state of the revocation list.
Nice. That's great job. Thank you.
Awesome.
And final update maybe on like the discussion on moving AFJ to the Open Wallet Foundation is we had given it a 2-week period. Ankur made a comment that it might be good to also share it more in other communities and give it some more time. So we've also shared it in the OWF mailing list and the Discord and giving it some more time and to let people react to it if there's any objection. So if you still have a thought about it and want to share that, please do comment on the issue, the discussion. I'll post it again, and then probably during the next AFJ call or something, we will bring it up and we'll finalize it. But yeah, no need to hurry in this decision.
Thank you for the update. Any other updates on our projects? I love hearing about progress. Okay, so here's the 3 top most interesting items on our there's a marketing update with some new Aries logos. Hyperledger has updated sort of the branding of Hyperledger, and so there's some logo updates alongside that we could talk about as part of that. I would love to have an IW recap with all the topics related. So there were not that many Aries specific sessions. There were a few, but generally kind of all the topics that relate to the work we care about, which is an awful lot of what goes on at IW. So just kind of recap for those that were unable to attend. And then the other thing that I added here after thinking last night was this is a reasonably good time to take a pause and sort of discuss where we are, where we're going, and if we want to change directions or shift gears a little bit, with our work here in the Aries community, generally speaking. And so this, of course, is something we can do anytime, but IW kind of giving us a pause on the meeting schedule last week, and the rest of it. This seems like a really good time to have this discussion. And so I'd like to spend some time doing that. Are there any other changes or suggestions or modifications to the agenda before we get going? Oh, and Timo, see you're mentioning the OID for VC support and SDJOT support in AFJ in the chat. So, any other changes to the agenda? All right, Alex, I think it's over to you. I'm suspecting you want to share.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So just following up from what Sam said, as you probably know, Hyperledger rebranded recently. You can see it on their website. They got the new logo, the new font. And as part of that, we are revisiting the logos for Aries and other projects to be in line with that new branding. And one option was just to take the existing logo and use it with the new fonts and the new styles they got there. But we also, as an opportunity to update it and to make it a bit more in line with the projects and also more consistent potentially across some of the projects. So how can we have some similarity between Aries, Indie, and the non-creds, for example? So you have a consistent styling of those. So all that led to some logo content work that we've been discussing at the Aries marketing group, which you're welcome to come to. Link is in the slide notes, and also in the slide notes is a link to the document I'm about to share, which shows the 3 logo concepts. And this is just to get your initial ideas, the initial feedback, and there's the opportunity to add comments to this document ongoing as well. So let me do the share here. All right, so here are 3 Aries logo concepts. And this is not, you have to choose 1, 2, or 3. You could say, I actually hate them all, and that would be okay feedback. But hopefully we're on an okay track. What's not in play for discussion is the fonts on the right. So the Hyperledger, that's their logo font for the word Hyperledger, and the font below is the same font they're going to use for all their projects. So that's going to be the same, and the relative sizing of those is set as well. I think it makes sense to continue the same Aries color as we already have. So that's the same color as the existing logo. Excuse me. So we get to the part on the left, which is all in play. And we had some discussion as a marketing group on, well, what could we do here? And the idea behind this, each of these, well, I'll start from the top one. The idea was an idea of containing all of these things in a single toolkit, so a larger container, hence the rounded rectangle. And then the upper chevron in green has this sort of multiple meaning. Before we looked at number 2, we had number 1. We're thinking, well, is this like a nod to the trust triangle, as well as, pointing upwards? And so, a nod back to space and the existing logo styles, and very simple, very contained, but also all inclusive. So that was the idea behind number 1. And then we added number 2 to make it more explicit about the trust triangle with the dots. And then Sam suggested quite rightly that how about we have something more, tied back to Aries itself, and of course the ram and the horns. And so that led to concept number 3. And before I just get any initial thoughts, I want to put this in a bit of context as to the continuity between the logos. So if I scroll down here, just exploring how Indie and non-creds could be alongside, there was a concept for Indie using this, again, same colors, same style, but here's the Indie, but using nodes connected, but with a almost like a check mark, so a dual meaning to the Indie logo there. And the non-creds, the same approach we've currently got, just updated to be the same style as what we've just been looking at just now, so with the rounded corners and just more consistent in that way. So that's the continuity we are exploring between the logo types. And now it can be now, or you can digest this. The links in the chat. Any comments, any thoughts? I like this one. I hate that one. What are you doing? This is the best thing since sliced bread. It's all welcome right now. Or nothing.
You're also, you can post in chat if you don't want to verbally speak up. Colton had a
Yes.
comment in the chat. So,
and you can also take away the link after the meeting when you've got more chance to think about it. And it's got comments turned on. So please leave any comments you have about it. More than welcome. Which may be a better way to do this anyway. We wanted to bring it, we wanted to, drive ahead. We want to, get like a bit of a steer and then get it down to like, a good candidate and say, this is the way we want to go. Are we all happy with that? So this is the first stage of that. All right. Well, I think that was enough of a pregnant pause. It's there. Feedback is welcome. Oh, looking at the chat comments, I should bring those up right now. 1 second.
I'll also add that if your organization has like a graphic design person, or if you yourself have experience or interest in this area, we'd love to collaborate. And if there's anything that you could offer in this realm, we'd really appreciate it. So feel free to join the party in terms of this project for sure.
Absolutely. Just to recap comments in chat, one liking simplicity and number one, and one person liking number two. So this is all great. If there was like an overwhelming trend one way or we were off track, it'd be good to know. But it sounds like, yeah, please I'll close it there because we've got lots of cool things to talk about. But comments are welcome. Reach out to us, myself, Helen, obviously directly as well if you wish. And thank you. And this document will be here for your perusal as desired.
thank you. So I do like Colton and I'm not sure who you are, but I like your comment too about the network and connections. I think that's really cool. Yeah, this process of rebranding is starting. There's it's not yet it's not that yet done. If you cruise around the projects, you'll see that they've sort of, the Hyperledger based branding is there, but the projects themselves have not kind of like yet moved over to the new font and stuff. And so they'll be part of that. Of course, this is the old logo that we've had in the font that we've used to represent. So so that's there. Is there a way to see all the projects? Oh, perfect. So you can see that this is really similar for non-creds, which actually I really like that logo. That's cool. And the new one too. And so yeah, I think that's coming along. Anyway, thank you, Alex, for that. Also, knowing both Alex and Helen, if you have something else entirely that you think would be you want to throw into the ring, they would very much welcome that, and would be interested in working with anyone who's curious. And everything else. So don't feel like you can't speak up because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings or whatever else. And this is important. This is how our project will end up being represented. Logo, posted on things and how it's shared and everything else. And so that kind of matters a bunch. So cool. And Colton with more feedback in the chat, which is excellent. So keep that coming. Next on the agenda is a recap of IIW, and this is doing weird things to me. So this is an open discussion for those that were able to attend IIW or to share, and people who weren't to ask about what actually happened there and what the types of discussions were. Given that IIW is very much sort of an early workshop thing, oftentimes there's lots of movement on development of things, and so helping to kind of understand where that goes helps us as a project to know what kind of things we should be focusing on, or what the potential issues are, or how to navigate things, and that's an important piece of that. So with that, let's open the floor for folks that want to share what happened on what different topics, and I will attempt to take notes here. as we go. Who wants to start?
I can jump in with a couple of things. From a within our community view, and I should have done this in the announcements, BC Gov announced in an on-creds in W3C format code with us. So 100,000, 105,000 Canadian fund to in three groups, one for the Rust work, one for Akapai, and one for AFJ. So that was done. So that's to try to get everything in a non-creds into W3C format, allowing multiple signatures on a credential and allowing basically, remove the legacy format or eventually deprecate the legacy format so we can transition over to using that commonly. Another non-creds session that was held was V2 code, and on-creds V2 code was made available. So this is a much longer horizon event, but an on-creds 2 code is available now. It adds flexibility for the underlying signature schemes being used, so allowing the use of BBS Plus and PS signatures as well as CL signatures in implementing zero knowledge proof based non-creds or trying to be as consistent with the functionality of a non-creds. And the other thing it enables is the use of a lot more ZKP based mechanisms, so well beyond predicates to things like set membership, range proofs, signed integers, and allowing the issuer to specify they want to use things like verified encryption of data, so that things like a credit card number can be encrypted differently for every verifier, but when passed back to the issuer, the deriving credit card number can be determined. So roughly what Apple Wallet does with your credit card. So every merchant gets a different number, but Apple is able, or whoever is able, to determine what was the source credit card used. So those sorts of features. So there was a lot of interest in that. A number of new organizations that are interested in this type of work, including some folks in Japan that are deeply into BBS Plus. We're very interested in collaborating on that. So we're hoping to get some energy around that. I was involved in a launch. I didn't participate in the sessions, but have been involved in working on a thing called DidWebS. So something that evolves DidWeb, is compatible with DidWeb, but adds features of carry, and notably self-certifying identifiers, a chain of all events related to the evolution of the keys, pre-rotation of keys, and multi-signature would all be supported in that. And then the idea of did URLs for signed files. So did / an on-cred / schema / this is my schema.json is a signed file. So there's a JWS beside it. But so it gives authenticity or verifiability to the signed file. So that gives a way for an on-creds, for contexts, JSON LD context, for rendering information, for OCA files, any sort of file that the issuer wants to accompany their credentials with, or any file that a DID owner controller wants to publish can be published with that. And then finally, a DID/whois DID URL that provides a verifiable presentation that can contain multiple VCs about the it's not DID whois, DID/whois. So DID WebS DID, and then a whois/whois at the end of it, that is a verifiable presentation that contains VCs where the DID is the subject of the VC. So if an issuer wants to publish all of its public information about itself, why it is authorized to issue credentials, it could use the /whois DID URL to provide those. So those are all features in the DID WebS spec. So something useful to look at, because it does give a sort of verifiable way to use the web as a DID resolution mechanism. Lots of things on OpenID for VCs, particularly how one uses keys for or attempts to use keys to identify who the owner, who the holder of the key is, of a verifiable credential. So not using unlinkable mechanisms, but actually specific keys to identify the holder. And then they had another one that was kind of funny to look at, where again, once you eliminate something like the link secret, now you have to figure out how you link them together. And so they had a session on how you bind the holder to the credential they've been issued without having to have a hardware-based key for every credential you have. So that's kind of an interesting one that came through. So what they called claims-based. So you would use common claims between multiple credentials as the mechanism for trying to achieve holder binding. So things that we've in our community have sort of taken for granted in using it on creds. It's just how holder binding is done. A bunch of new, coming up with new mechanisms for doing that, that will be interesting. The common one was the use of linking names across credentials as the binding mechanism, which of course is fascinating when one considers how often names change, or names are mistyped, or different names are used, even just minor variations. So interesting approach and interesting to look at. I think those are the ones I'd highlight right now. There wasn't as much. Yeah, I'll just stop there and turn it over to others.
Thank you, Stephen, for a brain dump on a bunch of stuff. Anyone else want to share their perspective on what happened? Ariel, any thoughts?
Well, there was, I don't know if you, because I just arrived, but there was a session that you made about the how can we improve OpenID by using DIDCOM, which is something that I think it's a good strategy, because we know that in some regions they are already using OpenID. So instead of trying to compete with them, maybe it's a good idea to just complement them, right? So
Yeah, for better for worse, a lot of people are going to have to use those, and so if we can help solve issues that are out of scope for
exactly.
their
Yeah.
protocol, then we can work on solving that. Although the one that I had initially identified, turns out they have, and I don't know how this did not come up in our conversations at IW, but they have a way to share, and I'm still not clear how common this is. They have a way to share a URL that can be used to push an offer to a wallet. Still sort of sorting out how common that is, or if there's any issues to it, but I'm not sure how that didn't come up in our conversations, or in the first one that they had, where the inspiration came from, where folks were asking about things like, what if I need to push an updated credential, and things were kind of considered out of scope there. So anyway, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was so I don't know, Colton. I don't know how common it is, and I'm trying to find that out. But yes, so here's the idea, Timo, is that there's a handful of things that came up on the during the OID for VC. I'm missing an I on my thing here. On day one, where people were asking like, well, how do I do this or how do I do that? And there was a couple of items where like it was just out of scope for the spec. And so I wasn't going to hold a session about using DIDCOM alongside it, but but I did, and we had a really good conversation. There's just, of course, because of the interaction model, and also just because of the scope of DIDCOM as sort of a generic way to do protocols rather than just very focused on VCs. There was a handful of opportunities to solve issues, and one of them, for example, is that if you don't use the existing mechanism to push a credential offer, but you need the user to like scan a QR code, of course you can't do that when the user's not actually there. They do have a mechanism, and I'm not sure how common it is. It involves sort of an optional client dynamic client registration piece and passing a variable there. But one of the ideas is that we can provide a protocol that I've already got in draft form that would allow for the passing of a credential offer in the format required by the OID for VC specs over a DIDCOM message to allow for that interaction to then begin. They could take that offer and then act on the credential, using OpenID for VCI to actually receive a credential. Similarly, if you are doing OpenID for verifiable presentations and you want to ask them for a verification after you've already had an initial one, you could use a sort of a bootstrapping DIDCOM protocol to then prompt the action that would happen in that other one. And that's something that's not present in the verifiable presentations protocol. It's only really designed for a model where you're actually right in front of them. And so the obvious bootstrapping step here is that if you have a DID for the holder, vice versa is also true. If you have a DID for the holder that the issuer or the verifier has, or vice versa, that the holder actually has, some of these other things, then knows the DID for the other party, and that DID has a DIDCOM service endpoint, then of course there's nothing to stop you from reaching out and talking over DIDCOM protocols in addition to the supported OpenID for VC protocols. And so if you make technology choices that let you have that, then there's sort of an easy process to do that. And of course in DIDCOM v2 there's not even a handshaking step, which means the very first message you send could be a meaningful thing to the other party to then sort of prompt something to occur. And so another obvious one is revocation notification. That probably needs a little bit of a revisit, but the idea that you can message from an issuer to the holder that the credential they have been issued has been revoked. That's a convenience method. There are other obvious revocation methods that are checked during verification, but messaging that to the user can prompt a better user experience. Instead of a user figuring that out, either their software has to check all the time the existing revocation mechanism, or they find out at time of presentation that it's been revoked is a little bit awkward. And so there's some UX things that can happen there. But there's an interaction model difference where, with the one exception of the ability to push a a credential offer through a URL shared. There's no other way defined to send something from sort of the institution side of an exchange to the user side of that exchange. And when the user's not actually like staring at a screen or being prompted using some out-of-band method like on a website to do so. And so there's a handful of things that could be used alongside there. So I have a draft, and Timo, I should send you the draft of what I've got, because it's in a tab somewhere. Because we need folks that understand both the capabilities of DIDCOM and the so I'll add this to the list here, but then I can also just open it up in a tab. Here in the meeting share, there is a callback parameter defined in their spec. There's a credential offer endpoint that they can pass during the dynamic client registration, which is what 7591 points to, and so this can be used in order to send that or get the party started, but it's unclear how common that is, given that it didn't come up in discussions at IW at all. And so the idea here is that you could actually, have this is obviously a little rough, but you could have a protocol defined that allowed for the pushing of a credential offer, where the credential offer is just defined in the other format. And then here's a different message used to pass a URI. The URI, passing it this way actually avoids a handful of problems that we're of course aware of with protocol handlers in iOS, for example, where it behaves erratically. And so just using the OpenID credential offer protocol name here doesn't mean it always lands where you think it should inside of the mobile device. And so if you of course have a DID for the other party and a DIDCOM service endpoint, pushing it over that avoids the issue. And so it ends up at the right place and can be parsed and used in that manner. And so there's definitely some sort of thinking and figuring out to do, but it's possible that we could document the use of a handful of protocols that could allow for sort of use alongside the OpenID for VC protocols. This isn't banned in the architecture reference framework. For example, in Europe, there's an other protocols sort of squishy definition thing that's been referenced there. And if there are needs within that community that are not well served within the scope of the OpenID for VC protocols, then it's pretty easy and interesting to sort of offer DIDCOM as a way around those issues without having to modify the scope of the OpenID for VC spec, depending on sort of what the use case needs actually are. Anyway, I'm very open to feedback on this. This is I wrote this Monday and yesterday and kind of put it together. So definitely seeking feedback, and I'll have a couple other ideas that I think may work. And then obviously there needs to be a section that talks very explicitly about the technical details of how you bootstrap into a DIDCOM exchange from an OpenID for VC exchange. I mean, in simple terms, it comes down to like, is there a DID and is there a service endpoint associated with that DID? But drawing those details out to make it a little bit easier to follow for someone who's less familiar with DIDCOM is the desired idea there behind that additional documentation that could be used in that way. So sorry, Ariel, that was, you brought it up and then I talked a way more, but are there other things that you'd like to share or offer about IW generally speaking, or on that topic or anything?
No, but that's fine. You covered it well. No, maybe the other thing I would like to mention is that I was very happy to see in the IIW we have on Wednesday we have the demo hour, and there were about 20 or so demos, and it was nice to see that at least a quarter of them were Aries-based implementations. We had, for instance, the one from VCGov. We have from Entidad, the farm the farmers project about which is based on AFJ. We have ours in the 2060. We have also the a demo from Patrick from ID Lab about the test bench. So it's nice to see that, because I felt last time in April I felt like that Aries was somehow losing traction, let's say, in terms of participation. Maybe it's because you were there, right? Because the last time you weren't.
Yeah, I doubt I had anything to do with it. But there were a lot. And the Entidad demo, for example, was pretty great and actually showed interoperability between two separate wallets, which seems to be the holy grail of the identity community, and we've been like doing it for a while now. And so stuff like that I think is pretty cool. The Entidad stuff is AFJ based, and they actually wrap it. This would be an interesting demo to have in our group. They wrap it in a low code environment, which allows them to wire things together pretty easily.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that it was quite a quarter, but now that you bring it up, there was, and I didn't get them all listed here, but there was a lot of demos that used Aries code at IW, and so that's
the one from BCGov, the BCGov showcase is Aries based, right?
Yeah. But they weren't there showing Akapai exactly. They were just using it to show the other stuff that they were doing.
Well,
Yeah.
also the AFJ Aries bifold wallet as well, BCCAV wallet. That was a large focus as well. So it's both Akapai and AFJ.
Right. And that was an AFJ bifold, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that was really cool. The other thing that I did was there's two other relevant things that happened. I don't see Daniel here today. One was there was a sort of DIDCOM 101 session, and we where I explained DIDCOM and used the demo as a backdrop to do so, and I love doing that. I love the ability to sort of set this up and happen. Phil in the audience, pulled it up and was the other side of the demo, and we were able to look at the messages and explain kind of what happened and what the capabilities were and everything else. And there was a mix of both people who had heard about DIDCOM but had been a while, and people that had that didn't know anything about it at all in that session. And so that was kind of a cool way of doing that. And so that was a good session. And there was Daniel did on the last day a DidPure 4. And I don't have the link for his browser resolver. I could dig that up and put it in the notes. He built a browser-based resolver for DidPure 4 that helps you. You can paste in a DidPure 4 did, and then it unpacks it and then shows the short form and the long form and kind of all the stuff there that's going on. And so that was really cool as well. There are now two separate language implementations of DidPure 4, and I'm assuming others coming along. There's a TypeScript and a Python. Are the two implementations that Daniel has written as part of that validation effort. The TypeScript, of course, to drive the browser demo piece there. And there's libraries in package repositories as well for that. There's a DidPure 4 present, I think, for both JavaScript and Python and the associated repositories. And so that was cool too. There's some discussion of why DidPure, and there was recognition of the fact that DidPure is valuable even in the presence of other did methods because it sort of solves a very specific problem not well addressed by the other approaches.
It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. Sam, suggestion, DidCom 101 and DidPure 4 as a Hyperledger workshop would be pretty great. Combining those two. Might be a really interesting idea.
Say that again.
DidCom 101 and DidPeer 4, and including those demos as a Hyperledger workshop topic might be a really good thing to do.
Cool. I'm gonna take a note of that. DidCom 101. Who should I reach out to for that? Would that be you, Sam?
Yes, although we have other people that could do it too.
Yeah.
And DidPeer 4, who do we think would be the person to present that?
I'm kind of thinking doing the two together.
Okay,
yeah, we
cool.
can present both in the same session, and there's enough understanding floating around at this point that a variety of us could pull that off.
Yeah.
One of the things that with the timing, Stephen, we may want to talk about, it may be nice to sort of reach the point where we've validated DidPeer 4, and actually like accepted stuff in, and that's actually landed in the DidPeer 4 spec, and then do it, just so that there's not a, and we anticipate getting there soon, right?
Yes, we do.
Within weeks.
Yeah, which is why I'm thinking we could anyway
get on the calendar.
Yeah, get on the
Sean,
calendar.
that'd be great. Since you're here, that would be awesome. To be able to,
I'll reach out on Slack.
Yeah, that'd be a good. And combining them both, I think, would be really good, because either one of them is not quite enough for a full like workshop thing, but together it's actually really good. We could, if we wanted to, Stephen, do you think it makes sense to include did rotation in there for DidCom V1?
Yes.
Because that would be another concept that is newish and has moved fast, and folks could come up to speed on to useful effect.
Yeah.
And yep. And I mean, that sets the stage also for the DidCom V2 adoption because of the did rotation involvement there. So.
Yep.
Cool. Timo, I see your comments in the chat, and I'll make sure to grab those so that those links so that I can follow up on that later. But very cool. So that's a great idea, Stephen, actually. The other thing about OpenID for VCs that I would love to bring up is that there was a lot of discussion about profiles of OpenID for VC. And I've had some post conversation with Daniel Bloom about this as well, who's not here to defend himself, but the realization was that saying we both implement OpenID for VC is pretty insufficient to indicate compatibility between two different projects. And so you need to point to the same profile, and it has to be a well-defined profile that includes those things, and the other decisions that are kind of out of scope of the spec. And this is interesting because Aries interrupt profiles have functioned as a way for us to sort of target development on like fixed non-moving things with rapidly moving development, and I think they've been very effective for that. The concept of profiles has emerged in a handful of other places, but sometimes they've been used as a pressure release valve for disagreements about how a spec should work. And this is a little bit of a hot take that Daniel offered, but it's a really good one that I think has merit of discussion, in that there is if you put too much on profiles from a difference of spec implementation perspective, then it's kind of like planned or non-interoperability, or planned divergence from the spec. And that had me thinking kind of a lot. But there were definitely discussions of profiles and what was contained in which profiles. There was some discussion about whether profiles could converge, because there's like, I think at least 4 profiles in the OpenID for VC space. And of course they need to be more aligned in order to make that work. And so anyway, that was a little bit of a more controversial topic, but that was an interesting discussion that happened as well. I don't know what else to write down here except for profiles, but that was definitely part of the discussion. Other things that folks want to add?
I think on the point you made with like intro profiles, I think I agree with that. I think especially in the OpenID world, there's I think a lot mentioned as this is out of scope of the spec, keeping the spec simpler and then moving it to an interop profile. But yeah, that doesn't necessarily make interop easier. Or well, like you're never gonna get interop based on a spec. You need to have interop then very specifically on an interop profile because there's so much difference. I don't know if it's a good thing to move things a layer up. Maybe it can help in still using the same foundation, but like applying different opinions a layer higher, or whether it results in like divergence and having just different implementations of the same specs, basically.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that either. When Daniel said it, I was like, I gotta think about this. This is it was kind of a hot take that I needed to hear, and I think could maybe be a caution on the use of profiles in spec development. Yeah, so in our own work, one of the questions that came up is, and we're kind of out of time and blending a little bit into the open discussion about direction, which I think we ought to spend more time on in a future call. But one of the things about profiles is that there's a bunch of us here in the Aries community seeking to interop, or to add support for the European designated standards and such. And so it would be useful with our combined code efforts and libraries and testing, et cetera, to actually identify the profiles that exist. Hopefully we can not create new ones that we are actually using as a community to try and achieve that larger goal of interoperability with the European standards. And as a community, we can hopefully figure out what profiles we ought to be targeting, and maybe one, maybe more than one, that already exist in order to make that happen. And I don't know personally enough about this to say anything intelligent about it at the moment. There's some learning that I think we've got to do, but one of the conversations we can have to coordinate our efforts is, well, which profiles are of OpenID are we actually kind of targeting? And if there's enough commonality around our community within Aries, then we should band together and try to figure that out, and perhaps even offer some testing along the way to make that work. Any thoughts or wisdom there? It's definitely something that we need to figure out as we're trying to make this and test our code and everything else. And so I think trying to bring that topic up in the future so that we can gain some wisdom from the progress we're making would be a good idea.
Sure, I missed a part of what you said. So you're like thinking of like, how are we going to make sure that our implementations will be interoperable, and like looking at which interop profile we are going to support.
Right, and not necessarily within our community. We already have pretty good interop, right? But with the other sorts of goals that folks have, like we've a lot of European projects are using OpenID for VC. Well, which profiles are they targeting? And can we, as a community, work together towards adding support for those profiles?
Yeah,
that's kind of the open question there. And I desperately don't want to make a new profile. so targeting existing ones, I think, given the previous discussion we had, I think targeting existing ones would be desirable.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think we're also very much looking still like where it's going to go. We are in AFJ currently like targeting deep profile. I don't know if that was discussed at IIW as well, but that's like one we have in the Netherlands, but more as like a very simple one because there was no other profile. And I think another one we're interested in following is like the Hype, but I do think they're like not going to use DITs as I understand, and like they're making some choices which I think like I would also want another profile. So then, yeah, I'm still curious to see what that profile is going to be.
Not using DIDs is a red flag for me. that adds some complications that they're going to end up having to reinvent the did core spec if they don't use dids for its abstraction properties, and that's not great.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we created Deep, just because there wasn't a real like winner yet on like how can we get interop for OpenID for verifiable credentials.
Maybe one of the things we can promote in the larger community is more discussion comparing profiles to try and figure out if that can actually reach a good convergence. A profile not using DIDs, I think, is quite limiting. And so I think it would be much better to say, hey, we're using DIDs, but these are the only DID methods we're using. That's a normal choice. And I think saying that we're not using DIDs at all, I think is quite problematic. But okay, really good discussion. We're unfortunately out of time. And so I want to, I think it would be worth still addressing this open discussion on energy. We're also have, we can start out with the mentorship project review from the VCX crowd, which I think would be fantastic. And so I think that's what we have on deck for next week. Thank you folks for coming. I appreciate your contributions and discussion today and all the work that you do in the code and in the standards. And we will see you all in other meetings and next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.